Welcome to Business Coaching Secrets with Karl Bryan. If you want to attract new high-end coaching clients, fill live events, and build a wildly profitable coaching practice where business owners pay, stay, and refer, you've come to the right place. In this podcast, Karl provides his keys to the kingdom for finding and signing high-paying clients and building the coaching business of your dreams. Here we go.
Hey. Hope everybody's doing good. Karl Bryan coming at you. Fans Road Dog. Road Dog's away with his family, so we gave him a pass today, and I told him I'd take it from here. So he sent me in some questions, and I'm just going to riff. So just me and you here today. I'm going to start with, last week we were talking like internal, big brain versus little brain. So it was answer to the question, how do you help someone control? I'm not, you're good enough, I'm not good enough, like that kind of frame. So I just want to expand on that if I could. I answered it this way. It's your monkey brain. There are two parts of your brain. There was big U and little u. Hopefully you remember. Not. Encourage you to go back and maybe listen, had some positive feedback. But the question is, if you have big U versus little u, as in Jekyll versus Hyde, at any given moment, my question is, who's winning? Who's winning? And as a frame, little brain wants to argue about nothing. Big brain wants to change the world, right? So it's just like your prefrontal cortex sparring with your amygdala. Think of it as, so we all have, Jekyll and Hyde. And again, it's Jeff Bezos. He retired at 57 with a cool, 200 billion or 197 billion, I think to be exact, I believe. Don't know that. But anyways, if he's got it, beating him up. I want you to be forgiving of yourself. If you're doing that, high achievers tend to do it. But remember, like one of the things I also said, your new life is going to cost you your old one. That's a tough realization for a lot of people. And by the way, I think that's some popular quote that's out there. I got no idea who said it. But again, your new life is going to cost you your old one. Not to mention, as your emotions go up, your intelligence goes down. Right. So again, are you spending time controlling, your emotions? Are you controlling that little brain that's trying to dominate and not allowing you to tap into your intelligence? So that's what I kind of said last week. So therefore, and I kind of want to just close the loop, like more solution based, is that, it's not your fear of failure that's going to stop you. It's your fear of other people watching you fail that will stop you, right? So there's that. Maybe solution in plain English. You must not let your need to be right overpower your need to find what's really true in this situation. So again, don't let being right overpower understanding and getting to the realization of what's true in any given situation, right? So what is really true in the situation that you might be dealing with? What's really true in the situation that your client is dealing with, right? You got to slow down and search for that. And I got to tell you that life will be a million times easier. Stop and think, stop and think, stop and think. And by the way, bonus point, for life is a mirror. So as you start to use big brain more and allow it to overpower that little emotional brain, those around you, wives, husbands, clients, staff, kids, etc., guess what they do? They start to do the same, because life is a mirror. So never forget that your life is a mirror of what you're putting out there. So we all know that guy or gal that's just a constant. There's just constantly challenges, constantly, constant issues. Like if that's the case, like basically they're the gasoline, and you go, and they're a really good person is what you say to yourself. They are, but they're just letting little brain dominate, right? So like that overpowering, I want to be right. The bottom line, what I'm trying to get at here is the biggest hater you need to overcome is probably named you. And it's not you, it's little emotional and irrational you That's the person we need to dominate. That's the person we need to start to learn to control. It does a lot of damage. And haters will come, by the way. You're going to take market share. You're going to take sales. You're going to start hearing the names of your competitors are going to start hearing the names of you, right? And like, what are you going to do? What do you do when you hear the names of your competitors? Do you start like what people do? They're trying to sell. They start trash talking the competition. Like, is that a good idea? And the credibility that you lose is massive when you do that. So no, that's little brain stuff. Like you've got a seminar, and then they've got a seminar. You start taking people away from them, and they're coming to your seminar, or they start taking people away from you. These types of things. You gotta deal with this in a very rational way. Kind of like, okay, you want to be concentrating on becoming the number one business coach in the city, in the state, in the country. That's higher level, bigger brain thinking, as opposed to, oh no, this one individual didn't show up or went with this coach over me. So that's remember, little brain wants to argue about little nothings. Big brain wants to change the world, right? I said I do like these random posts on like random thoughts on Facebook. Every once in a while, I'll send that out on my email list as well. But like everybody wants to change the world, but nobody wants to change the toilet paper, right? So we all know that person. And by the way, speaking of that person, a super ambitious, lazy person that doesn't follow through. Can be dangerous. That might be a little bit of a dramatic word, calling them dangerous, but I got to tell you, somebody that's ambitious and lazy, a lot of the time, frankly, those people will fall into the quote unquote influencer category. That when you're flowing through Facebook and it's the Lambo with the doors up and the perfectly framed photos in front of a house, or sorry, in front of a plane, right? That they rented or just managed to get some photos in front of that they can never afford in a million years, even to get on it, let alone buy it. Those are the types of people that I have. My experience is that they're super ambitious and then lazy, late for everything, etc. So whatever. Let's. I just think you want to avoid those. If you have a client who falls into that category, I want to be a little bit careful. Next thing you know, everything's all your fault, right? Anywho, so let's carry on from that. Ambitious, lazy people can be a little bit on the be careful side. So your biggest enemy is you, and that's little you. Who's winning, little or big? Make sure that big is overriding. And as our emotions go up, our intelligence goes down. We want to be operating with a high level of intelligence. We want our coaching clients to be operating with a high level of intelligence, right? So, and by the way, think about this, like give yourself some grace and forgiveness, right? You just make the goal rather than solve the world tomorrow. It's just a little bit better every day, a little bit better every day, a little bit better every day. I talk about it all the time whereby, if you double a penny every day on day 31, what? You got $10 million, right? The problem is it's day 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 for such a long time. And it's very unexciting at that point, right? So maybe the goal for you, it's 1% better every day. And in 365 days, you won't even recognize yourself because remember, you'll get that compounding effect. On day 31, you got $10 million, but on day 30, 29, 28, 27, 26, when you get about day 25, the numbers aren't exciting at all, but they spike in a hockey stick way. The same thing will happen with your life, with your relationships, with your business, with your marketing, with your successes, with your coaching client successes, with the number of referrals, with your events, your ability to do the events, your ability to get people to your events, etc., your webinars, your live trainings. And remember, like at your funeral, they're not going to talk about your accomplishments. They're going to talk about what kind of person you were in the process of achieving those accomplishments. So always being really, really careful and cognizant of the fact that we're going to, taking the high road versus the low road is kind of where I'm trying to go with that. And the last thing you should be worried about is the haters, right? Worry about if you don't have haters. That would be a bigger problem. So anyways, here I've got some questions from Road Dog. What he does, he takes these questions and he kind of isolates them a little bit, and I'm just going to go. So I get a few questions here with the name Elon Musk. So I'm just going to talk about Elon. Look, he's the alien trying to get home. He's a genius, in my opinion. The end. I think that he's demonstrated that. His big master stroke. If you look at Elon and you go, oh my gosh, guy changing the world. He's amazing. So many different categories, so many different businesses. Billions and billions and billions of dollars. Probably end up being the world's first trillionaire, or the opposite. By the way, and don't think for a second it couldn't go all sideways with him. The way that he's got some very, very, very big bets out there. Twitter. But anyways, look what he does. Remember, I talk about this a lot, but the problem business owners have, the mistake that your clients are making, the mistake your kids might be making if they're trying to get into business. It's like, Dad, is this a good idea? Is this a good idea? Is this a profitable idea? Will this idea make money? And what do I say? No, you got to change your spidey senses and go to problems. Start using your spidey senses to identify problems and then solve them. And by the way, the bigger the problem, the more people that have the problem and easier to find those people, like throw a net over top of them, I'll be able to tell you how big of a company that you're going to be able to solve, right? So what does Elon Musk do? He looks at big problems and then solves them, right? Like, one of the things people don't talk about with Elon is, like, I believe that he's changing the face of real estate right now, right? Like, how, you ask? I don't know if you'd know this, but like 65% roughly of the USA doesn't have internet access. Well, 65% of North America, even probably 70, it could be more than that. But they don't have internet access or cell access, right? And that number possibly blows you away. And it's the same number in countries like Australia and whatnot. Germany is like different because it's almost completely covered, but that's about population density. But a huge portion of the U.S. is empty with no cell phone or internet access, right? So still think mountain ranges. You ever gone for a long drive? You spent a lot of time where your phone didn't work, right? So he's got a little company like Starlink, right? And it's a business that shoots satellites into the sky, and then these satellites provide internet access in regions where you can't otherwise get it, right? So his goal is to have 100% internet access, available. And he believes, by the way, that is going to make the world a better place, because the problem he sees is some people want to live in the mountains, or wherever out in the middle of nowheresville, and have their horses and have their cows and their farms or whatever it might be, but they wouldn't be able to, communicate as the way, so they can't do it, right? You buy a place in the middle of nowhere, drill a well, get a satellite, and you're living in the middle of nowhere for next to nothing. You have total access that are otherwise unattainable. Like think about, like, nobody's really talking about that. But tell me that's not going to change real estate in quite a, like, you know what I mean? I don't know. That's going to change, and it's not going to happen tomorrow or next week. Again, it's going to have that compounding effect where, remember if you're playing Monopoly properly, halfway through you feel like you're losing, right? And it's gonna, but then you get that hockey stick type, growth. And the reason halfway through you get all your cards flipped over and you're borrowing money, landing on other people's stuff, etc., having to borrow money. But if you play Monopoly properly, you buy everything in sight. That's the way you win at Monopoly when it's all said and done. But anyway, so Elon, I said a few questions about Elon. So there's some thoughts on Elon. I mean, he looks at big problems and he solves big problems and he makes gobs and gobs of money. I get another question. How do I get my coaching client out of a funk? And then he's put in brackets, life and business question mark. Out of a funk. Like your greatest strength is going to be having your greatest strength. Well, no, the greatest strength of the uber successful, I'm going to say, is a muscle called urgency. You want to be strengthening that muscle in a very real and tangible way and consistently. How do you do that? You got to manufacture deadlines. Like if you've ever gone on a holiday, you were leaving on Saturday, on the Friday, the amount that you got done blew your mind. Okay. And I'm the same. You're the same. Our loved ones are the same. Our staff are the same. Our coaching clients are the same. So a bit of a hack is to manufacture that urgency. How do you manufacture events where you have to get things done? You got deadlines. So no doubt you could think of a million ways that you could do that, but are you doing that with your client? Are you facilitating that with your clients? One of the ways that I do this is I have an alarm that goes off 4 times a day, 8, 10, 12, and 2 throughout the day. Truthfully, I think that it used to jog me. It's been going on so long now. I maybe need to change something up whereby you know what I mean? Like I hear it and I can kind of continue to stay in beta mode. But it does, but it does jog me a lot of the time. And I just think again, am I being productive? Am I working on, problems? Am I moving to, do I have a productive couple of hours? And sometimes I do, and sometimes I don't. If I don't want to have another 2 hours that I can't be, look back and think of it as productive. That's how, you get a lot done. Anyway, so manufacturing urgency, I think that's like super important, and I think that will help folks get out of a funk, because if you introduce me to a child who's getting a lot of getting into a lot of trouble, they've got too much time on their hands, right? Got to keep kids busy. They got to be playing football, playing soccer, playing sports, etc. Hanging out with friends, good productive friends, going swimming, volleyball, whatever. You keep them busy. They don't have time for their mind to wander. I think of business owners, keep them busy, keep them moving in a positive direction. And I don't think that they'll fall into that funk. And, attracting people is about energy, and people with bad energy tend to repel people. But interesting, people wonder why they're alone, or they pretend, no, said differently, they pretend like they like to be alone, but in reality is they just, pretend that they prefer it. But in reality, what they, they're just negative people. You know what I mean? I would refer to that as a funk. So if you're in a state where everything is going wrong, your client's in a state where everything's going wrong, how do you get out of it? How do you start attracting positive people into your life, positive experiences into your life, positive business relationships? You know, be realistic is what I would say. Like, you're not going to go from uber depressed to joy. If you're an insane introvert scared to speak to people, you're not going to go to mega extrovert at the drop of a hat, right? And frankly, it's a bad idea anyways in a lot of dynamics. But what you could do is aspire every day to get a little bit better, a little bit better, a little bit better. Like, lean into something that's positive. Like, right, if you're in a really low place, taking your business or just personally leaning into optimism could be a positive step forward. And then you could, lean into the next step forward. Think of it like, okay, I'm trying to metaphor. You've got an elevator. I don't care if you're Warren Buffett, Tony Robbins, Michael Dell, Jeff Bezos. If you need to get to the 100th floor, there's one way to do it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You got to go past floor 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, etc. in order to get there. A little bit the same. So set some goals with yourself for your clients that just, make sure that you're celebrating successes each 10 floors, instead of setting the goal of the 100th floor and having to have so much work in between where you're at to where you want to go that, you know what I mean? They just don't quite get there. Said differently, the closer you are to the finish line, the faster you go. Okay. So I want you to think about somebody running a marathon. What do they do for the last, 50 meters? They kick it into high gear, whether they're in last, middle of the pack, or towards the front of the leader. The same thing happens. They kick it into gear at the last minute, right? So make sure that you're setting your targets so that they're within, eyesight, and then they'll go a little bit quicker, and then they'll get there quicker and quicker and quicker. So one of the things when I work out, I do boxing every morning. And it's a whole heck of a lot of fun. Gary Lightbourne's the guy that I work out with, and he's fought Tyson and Holyfield and George Foreman and Larry Spinks, and he's sparred with everybody. He didn't fight them for a title. He was the guy that was sparring with them. Anyway, so whenever we do something, we're doing push-ups, we're doing squats. He always counts in tens, right? So I'll do push-ups, and he goes, he counts 1 through 10, and then we start again. And the goal is to kind of, so rather than trying to do 100 push-ups, 1 through 10, 1 through 10, 1 through 10, 1 through 10, 1 through 10. And then all of a sudden, guess what? I've got to 50 significantly easier than I might have if I laid down trying to knock off 50 push-ups, right? So anyways, by the way, I had the high school record for push-ups when I went to high school back in the day. And then my best friend, so here's a good one. So my best friend, so you know how in high school you got 2 semesters? So I just rolled up one day, laid down, and, broke the record for push-ups, which was pretty cool, quite frankly. Didn't practice laid down, but I was just small and strong. And then so my best bud, so he knew, so he had 5 months to practice. So he's doing push-ups every night. And guess what? Boom, he rolls up and knocks over my school record. So there you go. So anyways, push-ups. Why did I don't know why I said that. There you go. That was kind of lame, possibly, but hey, I don't have my I don't have Road Dog here to keep me in line. Anyway, so there you go, getting out of a funk. I don't know. There's people much better than I at that. Speaking of things that people are much better than I, there was a question here about my faith. But again, I think Road Dog probably been here for a bit and never asked. There's people significantly better than I that can help you with faith. Truthfully, that's just something that I'm in the, you know what I mean? I'm a work in progress there, and working on it and where I fit. I'm a Christian, and I try to live that way. So I don't want to pretend like I got it all worked out. But hey, question is here. I do know this: a great faith is a faith with a foundation of forgiveness. That I know. A great faith is a faith with a foundation of forgiveness. And that's forgiveness of yourself. That's forgiveness of your family and your loved ones. It's forgiveness of those close to you, your coaching clients. Remember, the world is a mirror. So if you're more forgiving of yourself and others, guess what they're going to do for you? They're going to be more forgiving. The world is a mirror. And I think with saying that, though, you should be a little bit careful. Got to be careful to be too forgiving, and then we don't get anywhere, right? Like, again, I've got a 9-year-old daughter, and I whip her in the butt a little bit. I mean, I am absolutely forgiving of anything related to a shortcoming. But that being said, sometimes, I got to kick her in the butt a little bit, and I'm not shy to do that. So I think that you got to be a little bit, you get what you tolerate. Be a little bit careful to tolerate too much, right? Remember, and forgiveness, a really powerful saying around forgiveness is that forgiveness is for you. Forgiveness, yeah, it's for the other person, I guess, right? But significantly more important than that, forgiveness is for you. On the subject of faith, I know that the poorest countries in the world are the most religious. Think about that. Is there something there, right? Like, and I think it is. And do I have the answer? No. But I think what they're doing is like almost like they're sacrificing this life for bliss in the next. And I don't know. It just feels to me a little bit like they're giving their power away a little bit too much. So again, I'm not a believer in giving away my power. That's for sure. And I think again, let's just go to the poorest countries in the world are the most religious. I think they give too much power away to God, to Allah, to, the higher power, versus going out and bloody, fortune favors, the person that decides what they want and bloody well goes after it. That's what I believe. And again, you may disagree. This is a touchy subject for some, and I'm cool with that. So let's say insane speed requires immense clarity. Get really, really clear on what you want, and then you can go and get it. And I think you do it in a faith-based way. And remember, what I believe is the greatest faith, or kind of on a foundation of forgiveness. So I think we've talked about that in different weeks, semi recently. It's just like, again, be forgiving of yourself. It's when you're lying on your deathbed, one of the things that you're going to say, you wish you were more forgiving, specifically to yourself, right? Moving on, I get another question here. Why am I no longer the CEO of my company? There you go. Why am I no longer the CEO of my company? Long, convoluted answer that I could give you. I'll tell you, look, the CMO of Apple made about $25 million last year. But he'll pay about 50% tax because that's earned income. Okay, so 12.5 schmil, not bad if you can get it per annum. But Warren Buffett invests in Apple, and he took home about 250 million last year and didn't roll up for a single day of work. So again, the next level is becoming an investor. So there's entrepreneurs, and then the next level is investor. Something to think about. Everybody wants to be the CEO. Everybody wants to get interviewed. Like, I'm not CEO of my own company, and I haven't done an interview in like over 3 years, right? If that's the problem, I don't know if that's the problem, but if that's the dynamic, you want to grow from CEO to investor. And by the way, feel free to be the CEO. And I think that you don't do that early on. You know what I mean? You need to get company established, yada, yada, yada. But understand that billionaires make their money owning and investing in assets, not working for a wage kind of thing, right? Like they find what do professional investors do? They find great jockeys with excellent horses, let's say. And by the way, investors, what they don't do, and a mistake that I see out there, is that you don't look for a company that's in trouble and then buy it. You look for a good company with great people, great management at a fair price, or at least people a million times more intelligent, successful than myself. That would be Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger. That's what they do. And you can see there's a zillion interviews out there where they talk about that. So that might be a better frame than trying to find somebody that's in a little bit of trouble, right? And by the way, they also look for leaders in a category. That's an important framework, important part of their rules, like Coca-Cola, Apple, etc. And Warren Buffett was interviewed, and he said something to the effect of he never invested in it. When he decided to invest in Apple is when he saw the magic of iTunes and the recurring revenue. There's two things in a company. There's a lot of things that are important with a company, great management, etc. But I got to tell you, high margin and recurring revenues, so important and not understood at the level that it should. On that note, like, okay, Steve Jobs. If you followed anything, like I love Steve Jobs. I get in my office. If you see it, I got photos of my family and my best friends and holidays and to do and up with my family. I've got a picture of Steve Jobs in my office, which might tell you that I'm a little bit strange, not sure, but I believe that Steve Jobs is just inspirational times a million. And the way that, and by the way, had his shortcomings for sure, but you can't argue with his success in the business world. But okay, let me tell you this. Think back in the day, in the 80s, right? Steve Jobs invented what, I don't know that he invented the personal computer, but let's just say, he's out there flogging personal computers, one of the only people doing it. And let's assume that he's selling what I think was the best one of it in its time, right? How many times did he make the computer? And that's once. And then how many times did he sell it? That's once, right? And then he had to build another computer to sell it once. And what happened? He got fired from his job, right? He got kicked out of Apple, and then he ended up, going on to other things. Bill Gates comes along, and they were arch rivals for a good period of time. How many times did Bill Gates build the software? Think Word, Excel, etc. Think Microsoft Office. How many times did he build it? Once. How many times did he sell it? Like 1 billion times. Became the richest man in the world, and nobody fired Bill Gates, right? So like that's leverage on steroids, right? How many times do you write a book? Once. How many times can you sell a book? Forever. You build a course. How many times do you build it? Once. How many times can you sell it? No limit. Which, by the way, a little word called entropy needs to be talked about there, whereby, is your course, evergreen courses and whatnot, over time, the same way that you age, your courses age, your products age, your books age, your information ages. So you got to make sure entropy. You got to step in and improve it. Like think of Microsoft Office. It's like version 10, version 11, etc. Right? Like they kept upgrading it every year. They improved it, but they improved it, and basically you'd upload it to your computer. You know what I mean? Like, so again, they still built it once and then sold it an infinite number of times. And Bill Gates never got fired, right? So, and then by the way, Steve Jobs went on and he learned something when he built Pixar, which is basically the movie business. And he learned about leverage, whereby you do a movie once and then you could leverage it at McDonald's with the characters. You could license the characters and put them on blankets and put them on pillows. Put them on posters, do it at, rides at Disneyland, etc. But at the end of the day, he learned a thing or two about leverage, and then that was iTunes. So iTunes, that's how I got off that tangent. iTunes was very powerful. Which, by the way, okay, I was just thinking, am I going to explain this? But yeah, I have to now. Okay, so I think another thing very, very powerful that Steve Jobs learned whilst leaving Apple, coming back, but the power of the platform. So Steve Jobs, the story, he worked at Atari back in the day. Okay, so might be aging myself here. You may or may not be, familiar with the Atari. Probably are if you're listening to this. But the Atari, see, you weren't addicted to Atari. You were addicted to Pac-Man, and you were addicted to Donkey Kong, and you were addicted to Centipede. You were addicted to the games, right? Um, so so basically, what am I saying there? So then go iPhone versus BlackBerry. And like I was one of the last people standing with the BlackBerry. I love that keyboard. I didn't want to let it go. The touching of the thumb. I just wanted. I had an old BlackBerry and I loved it. And I just even with my iPhone, if you saw it, you'd be, what I mean, looks a little ratty tatty, whatever. Because I just don't want to upgrade. I don't want a new phone because then I got to learn new stuff and I can't be bothered. Right? It just doesn't mean that much to me. And I certainly it's not an optics thing for me. I really don't care if I've got the new latest greatest phone. Couldn't give a rat's backside, right? But anyways, okay. With that being said, why am I using an iPhone? Why are you probably using an iPhone? If you're not using an iPhone, you're using Android or something similar, maybe Samsung. But the foundation of it is this: is the Pac-Man, Donkey Kong, Centipede, the equivalent of that. You went from BlackBerry, and you were probably like me, where you didn't want to let it go, and you went to iPhone. Why? The App Store. The App Store killed BlackBerry, not the iPhone. So the iPhone is the Atari platform, but the apps are the equivalent of Pac-Man, Donkey Kong, Centipede, etc. Right? So you're addicted to checking the weather, checking your emails, checking your stocks. You're addicted, using Google Calendar, using maps, like you're lost and trying to get somewhere. Ultimately, that's an app. So the App Store killed BlackBerry. The iPhone didn't. I think that there's some power in that little word called integration. So these are the types of things that, and that's why Steve Jobs came back and ended up eating Bill Gates' lunch to a certain degree. But I think there's a big business lesson in there, again, but thinking butcher, baker, candlestick maker. I think these macro concepts are very important, but again, you got to get granular with those examples to be able to help the local small businesses. But again, margins, recurring revenue, etc. Memberships, are they like Amazon? Reason Amazon is or not. Look, Amazon is just killer business, but make no mistake, Amazon Prime, when they introduced Amazon Prime with free shipping, etc., I mean, that changed the game entirely. So instead of marketing and buying advertising, they took all that money into the customer experience, basically, right? So, yeah, so there you go. So there's that. That is the answer why. I don't know. So no longer CEO of my own company. That's that's the answer. I don't know if that's a good one, but that's my answer. I'm trying to help my clients invest as they earn more. Any recommendations? Okay. Yes, I think it's a good question. Some of you that might not be the most impactful question, but I got to tell you, you should always you should be encouraging your clients to take a percentage of everything that they earn and putting it and investing it on a weekly, at a monthly, at a minimum. But weekly is way better than monthly, and monthly is way better than quarterly, and quarterly is way better than annually. Your clients don't invest enough. I can almost categorically guarantee it. What's a good asset? A good asset's got two things: cash flow and capital gains. If it's only got one of those, it doesn't fall into the like ideal asset category. So like domain names, I own like hundreds of domain names. There's hockey cards. There's like paintings and art. There's old vintage cars. There's crypto, which by the way, you may love crypto and you might. I'm not getting into a crypto conversation. There's people that are, Bitcoin is holding steady at where it's at right now. Who knows? That may or may not be an asset. Anything you invest in crypto, by the way, I would expect or be at least prepared to see it go to zero. Be careful, is what I'm saying there. Not having that conversation today, but at the end of the day, crypto's got no cash flow. It's got capital gains, as do vintage cars, as does a painting, as does hockey cards, right? Versus real estate, stocks with a dividend, and then business ownership for sure have got cash flow and capital gains, right? Like I love Rich Dad Poor Dad. I was the guest speaker of the Rich Dad Poor Dad Canadian Super Conference way back in I'm going to say 2006, a long time ago. There was a time when I had read every single word that he had written, and I was a big fan. I loved his stuff. But what he says about real estate as a general rule is that it's the cash flow that matters, and the reality is that the capital gains is where the real magic is in real estate, right? Like it takes 10 years, fortunately, but the returns that you'll make in capital gains will blow you away by way of anything you'd make off of a rent payment. Like I own a house in Port Moody, sorry, Vancouver, and I bought the house for a little bit under $1 million, way back when, right before the crash of 2008. And this is what it looked like, where it wasn't exciting, like by where, like I literally lost, like I bought the house and then it went down in value because it was 2008, held steady there, but it didn't do anything, and now it spiked up to $3 million, right? But let me tell you, what most people would have done is they would have sold, and old money equals never sell. So the only reason that we took $1 million asset and turned it into a $3 million asset is following that old money rule of old money equals never sell. You introduce me to a family with old money, and I'll introduce you to a great grandmother and a great grandfather that never sold. Right. So then it will ultimately have that hockey stick growth. Remember, when you're playing Monopoly halfway through, if you're playing it properly, you feel like you're losing, right? It's at the end where you crush it. It's the same thing with a lot of your investments. You're going to see that it's not exciting. And then you get that hockey style type growth. But at the end of the day, anything that I made on rent payments on that house are trumped dramatically by the $2 million of capital gains. Hopefully you're picking that up. But, the book, let's get back to investing. The book will say you should invest 10%. I want to encourage you to invest 20%. And I would like for your aim to be investing 50% weekly, monthly, quarterly of your income over time. Okay. So 50% of what you earn is going into investment, investing in business, investing in stocks, investing in real estate. Right? Like domain names. I own hundreds of them, like, marketingplan.com, focus.com, turnkeys.com, and lots around coaching. I've also invested in a buddy who does collectibles like cards, baseball cards, basketball cards, hockey cards. And, I invested a very small amount early on, and he just did a $500,000 to $600,000 card deal. By the way, don't quote me on that, but it was a baseball card, but it was huge number. I was like, wow. That's one card, by the way. But so there's like the end goal of investing is to have your capital gains and cash flow from your assets to fund your lifestyle. Okay. So the end goal for your client, my end goal for you would be the money that you're putting into your investments, like your assets, that the capital gains from them and the cash flow from them would allow you to fund your lifestyle. Like really quick, let me give you, okay, so let's just say we buy a house for 500 grand, right? And let's assume that house is going to go up 10% per year. By the way, it will be high. Okay, that's a rule of 7. If you get a 10% increase, your assets will double every 7.2 years. The rule of 7, right? But so if you get a 10% year on year, you'd be doing better than historically. But that being said, I just want some easy numbers here. Okay, and let's assume that you're cash flowing $1,000 a month. Like let's say that your mortgage payment was $3,000 and you're getting $4,000 a month in rent, or your mortgage payment is $2,000 and you're getting $3,000 a month in rent. There's $1,000 of slush money there. So that would be $12,000 a year. And then if you bought a $500,000 asset that increased by 10% in a year, that would obviously be $50,000. How much do you got? So now you got $62,000 a year. And if your burn is less than $62,000 a year, guess what? You're doing well. Now there are some nuances here, little thing called tax. Okay, so I don't want to get granular, but what I want to do is help you create a frame that I'm hoping that you're going to see that it's not as hard as you might have thought it was. Like imagine if you had 3 of those houses. The mistake people make is they buy a house, sell a house, buy a house, sell a house. That's just stupidity, right? We buy a house and then draw down on the capital gains. Like, you know what I mean? Like it's borrowings instead of earnings. So you can borrow money from the house that you own and the capital gains, use that to put as a down payment on your second house, right? So none of your own cash down, and then allow your own assets to help them, turn. It's monopoly. One house into two houses into three houses, right? And then hopefully you're going to go hotel at some stage, but like multi-family, but three. So look quickly. I don't want to confuse you, or I don't want to lose you, right? If you did it three times on those $500,000 houses, again, with my very loose numbers, you'd have 180 grand a year if they were increasing by 10% and you were cash flowing, above your mortgage, $1,000 a month, which is highly, highly improbable. Okay. So like on the outer, if you invest in real estate, in the hotbeds, LA, New York, Toronto, Vancouver, Melbourne, Sydney, London, Singapore, these types of, you know what I mean? Like markets that you've heard of, 10% could be highly probable in different years. Think of the United States. If you invest in the center of the country as a general rule, certainly in Canada, you're not going to nearly get the capital gains that you're going to get in the other spots, right? So again, you got to know you make money when you buy, not when you sell as a frame, and there are tax implications, and so it's not that easy. But if you own three houses in good markets during the right times, and again, the right time, you got to own it for 10 years. So you're going to have 4 years that are going to be down, but then you're going to have maybe 6 years that are going to be on the right side of the ledger, right? So, but if you were to accomplish that, financial freedom would be yours, whereby your assets and your own cash flow would be what you'd be living off of, right? Frame I'm trying to give you there is it might be a little bit easier than what you were thinking. It's like, being worth $1 billion doesn't mean that you have $1 billion in your bank account, right? You become worth $1 billion off of your assets, not your cash, right? So let's say I got a business that does $5 million a year. So a different example. That was a real estate example. Let's use a business example, right? So you got a business that does $5 million a year and it's got 20% margins. Real simple. You got $1 million of profit. And let's assume I'm going to give you a 5x multiple on that. So guess what? You're now worth $5 million on that business alone, assuming you own no real estate, no stocks, no other assets, which by the way would be probably, I don't know, that's a bad idea. But you know what I mean? Like you got to, but you'd be worth $5 million, right? So now let's increase that company. Let's assume that we could go over time. We're going to try, if you did, the hardest million is your first million. So you managed to get a business to 5 million, getting it to 10 million wouldn't be an impossible task by any stretch of the imagination. Let's assume you continued to have 20% margins. I think there's a good chance going from 5 to 10 that you'd be increasing your margins versus lowering them. But again, if you're not staring at them, your client isn't staring at them, you're not helping your client stare at them, there's a good chance 20 would become 15, and that would be a very bad. Remember, there's scale and growth. Scale is when you grow and your expenses stay the same. And then growth is when you grow and your expenses come with you. You want to be able to maintain, keep your, the expenses under control while still growing the company. Translation, increasing your margins as you're growing. Okay. But back to my example, $5 million a minute ago with 20% margins. Now we're doing $10 million a year with 20% margins. Guess what? You're now worth 15 million. You were worth 5 a minute ago. Now you're worth $15 million. Your net worth from that business only. And by the way, it's possibly worth 150 million, as in 100x multiple, which would be again on the unrealistic side. But the reason, so just thinking how deep I want to go here, the multiple will increase probably like from 5 to 10. The reason that it would increase is 4 or 5 words: predictability, sustainability, growth opportunities, and risk. Okay, and scale, sorry, is the last one, right? So there's predictability, sustainability, growth opportunities, and risk, and scale. If all of those things were moving in a positive direction, the multiple that you're getting your company would go from 5 to 10. So anyway, question, if your company is doing 5 million and now it's doing 10 million, do Do you think it's more predictable? Do you think it's more sustainable? Do you think there are new growth opportunities? And do you think the risk diminishes as you get bigger and are around for a longer period of time? And the answer is absolutely. And that's how you can go from, getting, a $15 million valuation to getting $150 million valuation, which you've seen all those with Facebook and Instagram and YouTube back in the day, et cetera. Those are like growth stocks, right? So moral of the story is you need to build assets if you want to be wealthy along with cash flow. People think that cash flow, when people are thinking cash flow, you want to be thinking of cash flowing assets. That's what I'm trying to say. And it's the asset that is critical. So again, buy vintage cars and rent them out. The problem you're then going to have is that the vintage cars will diminish in value. So you need to maintain them and make sure that you're controlling anything that would resemble, you know what I mean? Like you want to maintain those vintage cars. You're not maintaining them. You're going to remember because the net worth is going to be more from the asset than it is the cash flow. The two of them, obviously piggyback one another. But if you're ruining all your cars, going to have to replace them all the time, this is a bad company. Your capex is going to kill you. Anyway, and then I might just explain this whereby, okay, we're in business coaching mastery in Mexico. I've explained this a few times and explain it again. I think there's total magic in this, in that I go on day 2, who wants to sell their company for $5 million? Pretty much all the hands go up, right? Including mine. And it's like, okay, who wouldn't? Okay, well, let's reverse engineer the dynamic of a company that sells for $5 million. Let's assume that you're going to get a 5x multiple to get your 5 million, right? Well, reverse engineer it. That means that you had $1 million of EBITDA. Okay, which is fancy word for profit, basically. So you're making $1 million a year. You've now got 5 million. But guess what? When you get the $5 million check, you think you keep it all? No. There's a little thing called tax. Wipe off $1 million. It's a little thing called brokerage fees, right? So you're going to pay 10%. Let's assume that's 500 grand. A little thing, there's going to be debt. There's going to be some staff that will probably be let go, and you're going to have to, pay them. There's going to be some debt. So the moral of the story, or what happened, is I basically took $5 million and it came down to about 2.75. Now, let me ask you a different question. If you were making $1 million a year ago or a minute ago, and now you got 2.75, but no business, is this a positive step forward? And the answer is, look, I need to know more. What's the state of your health? What's the state of the industry? What's the state of the business? How over it are you? Are your kids not interested in taking it over? Are you wealthy in other areas? Like, do you have other investments? And this is just play money to go and, toot around in Europe. Do you know what I mean? But let's assume not, because I got to tell you, we have a client that I just spoke to him within the last probably 10 days. And he just, oh my gosh, I wish I would have spoken to you earlier. Because my gosh, I sold my business for a couple $1 million, and he didn't end up with a good portion of that, and he'd love to have his business back. So hang on. So I've just identified, if that's, I don't know that it's a problem, but it's certainly a dynamic that I'd like to understand. I want you to think it as 1, 2, 3 options. Option number 1 is keep going with your business and running it and showing up day to day. Option number 2 is to sell it. What's option number 3? And option number 3 is to go, okay, hang on, we're making $5 million a minute ago, or $1 million of profit. Why don't I bring somebody in, pay them 150 grand a year plus incentives to get them to 250 grand, and their job is to grow it. And see, a lot of the time, the guy that sold that company would end up with us at Focus.com and become a consultant. What's he doing? He's consulting other businesses. I say, well, consult your own company. Hire a CEO, have him come in, you consult him. His job is to grow the company. And you're now making $1 million, you're going to be making 750 grand, assuming that he's going to realize all of his incentives and he's going to make a cool 250. You're making 750 grand and you're consulting your own company. I'll let you decide if that's a good idea. And if anything are to go sideways, or anything were to, if it went, the train derailed a little bit for a period of time, guess what you could do? You could come in and do a 3, 6, 9, 12-month stint and then, fix it up. And then again, step back into semi-retirement, consulting your own company and a few others like it. Like, wouldn't that be a better idea? Like, wouldn't that be something worth considering? And again, we'd need more information. We'd need more information on the individual. But my goodness, that's a bad. You know what I mean? That a lot of folks out there, the dynamic that I just gave you, sold their company and they do anything to get it back. And again, this is a macro concept, but as I'm consulting, coaching the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker, this is the kind of stuff that I'd like to know, that I'd like to be armed with, to make sure that, I am able to give my client the absolute best advice, guidance, and macro level guidance. You got to get way more granular and micro with, some of the advice to get there. And another option number 3. Remember, option number 1 is to keep going and keep working in the business. Option number 2 is to sell it. What's option number 3? And maybe that's franchising it, right? Bring in somebody, the CEO that you're going to bring in, the boss that you're going to bring in, the consultant, not the consultant, but the employee that you're going to bring in is going to be an expert in franchising. And you're going to give them, 1 to 3 years to basically frame this thing up and franchise it. Do you think that might be a good idea? Do you think that might be, better than selling it? And by the way, that might, dynamics of that. Let's say that you've got a process within your company that's really unique, works really well, and that your competitors would love to have. Well, guess what? You've got something that's licensable. You could do that instead, versus sell it. I don't know. So these are just types of things that I'd be thinking about. But as far as investing, I would absolutely be, encouraging your client to only invest in things that they understand, like day trading. Forget it. It's gambling. And, most day traders have a real horrible period and they make profit, and then give it all back. The same way people introduce me to somebody who flips houses, and if they continue to do it over, a body of time, they normally make profit, give it all back in one shot. That's what I've seen. That's sweeping generalization on the dynamic, but again, is that a good idea? What you need to do, you got to ride a boom. You got to have a, which means luck. A translation, ride a boom. Luck. The best time to buy real estate is during a boom, because you buy it and then it spikes in value immediately, and you can go back to the bank, redraw, and use some of that equity to go buy a second, and then potentially a third, and then potentially a fourth. Without paying any tax on that money. Remember, it's borrowings, it's not earnings. What am I getting at? How your clients should not only be earning money, they should be investing money. That's what I'm trying to say here. So there you go, folks. That is all I have got for today. Miss my boy Road Dog. I hope that provides some value for you guys. He will be back on site next week. But yeah, that's all I got for you folks. Thanks so much. And we'll chat to you next podcast. Bye-bye.
Karl Bryan built Profit Acceleration Software 2.0 to train business coaches how to find any small business owner more than $100,000 in 45 minutes without them spending an extra dollar on marketing or advertising. This becomes a business coach's superpower. So as a business coach, you'll never again have to worry about working with business owners that can't afford your high-end coaching fees. Check us out at focused.com.